There are limits to what our military can provide, so my recommendations will have to be informed by the strain we have put on our military services. General David Petraeus, top US commander in Iraq.
Jeremy Corbyn is with us, a British Member of Parliament, Brad Blakeman, former senior advisor to President Bush, and Dr. Saad Jawad Kindil, a member of the Iraqi Supreme Islamic Council. Gentlemen, thank you for talking to us on Inside Iraq. Brad Blakeman, would President Bush have been surprised at the speed with which Gordon Brown, the British Prime Minister, appears to have changed British policy on Iraq?
Not at all. I mean, certainly our closest ally doesn't make his decisions in a vacuum and is in close consultation with his allies, including the United States. So I don't believe it's a surprise at all. I believe that the decisions that we make together on an effort that we have a joint interest in are made with knowledge and input from both sides. So no, President Bush, I'm sure, is not surprised.
Does it make it more difficult for him, though, to persuade those people who don't believe it's right to continue with the present policy, to persuade them that he should stay the course?
If anything, it shows that our policy works, and that is when the Iraqis stand up, the forces stand down. The British forces performed admirably what they were tasked to do in the South, which allows them now to either go home or regroup in another part of Iraq to determine what their future mission will be. Remember, there were 30,000 British troops in Iraq 4 years ago. There are now 5,000. And our hats are off to the British for doing a great job. But that doesn't make America obligation less because the British have stood down. Quite the contrary, our mission has yet to be accomplished, and we have a lot of work to do before our troops can fully come home. And it transcends this president's presidency. The next president of the United States will have to deal with Iraq in their own way, but it doesn't mean that the presence of America will change much in the next couple of years.
Jeremy Corbyn, I'm going to ask you in just a moment about perhaps the changing nature of the British-US relationship, but I saw you reacting off-screen there to what Brad Blakeman was saying. Your thoughts on what he said?
Well, I think it's whistling in the wind, quite honestly. The United States policy, with the support of Britain, is in a complete mess in Iraq, and everybody knows that. It's monumentally unpopular throughout the world, but perhaps more importantly on this occasion, it's monumentally unpopular in both the USA and Britain. And I would think Gordon Brown is quite relieved that he's managed to get the troops out of Basra into a base outside Basra, and hopefully they'll all be home fairly soon. I personally wish they'd never gone there in the first place, but I hope they'll be home soon. And despite this claim of being a united front between the US and Britain, there are plenty of US commanders on the ground that keep on wanting British forces to be involved in much more combat activity and are complaining that they're involved in a largely training and supervisory role. Now, there is a slight difference of policy there, but Gordon Brown knows perfectly well that he's going to face an election maybe in 2 years' time, possibly less. And with the unpopularity of the war in Iraq, he will want the troops out as quickly as he can. George Bush isn't facing an election, he's only facing a legacy of the disaster of Iraq.
Brad Blakeman, when you talk about the successes of the American troops, it's worth bringing up George Bush's visit to Anbar province just a few days ago, in which he talked about how much safer it was than it had been even 4 or 5 months ago. And yet, within 48 hours of him leaving, we see American troops killed in pretty much the same region.
Well, certainly the insurgents and the terrorists who wish to do Americans harm are going to show on the heels of the president's visit that they're still around. Look at the state of Israel, a lone democracy. They have violence of this kind on a daily basis. Does that mean they're not a democracy? They're not a stable government? The fact is that this region is extremely troubled and faces violence that fortunately we don't see on the streets of America, and we're going to keep it that way because we're going to take the battle to our enemies on their terms and on their soil, not on American soil.
My point was that you compared it to Israel, and I said, in what sense is it similar? Because you don't have roadside bombs on a daily basis, you don't have mortar rounds being fired.
You do have roadside bombs in Israel, you do have suicide bombers in Israel, you do have a quote-unquote insurgency in Israel, if you want to call it that, from Hamas and others who seek to do Israel harm on a daily basis. Israel is a stable democracy, yet they face this kind of violence every day. It's part of this very troubled region of the world that experiences violence that we don't experience here in America. This is foreign to us, except for the attack that happened on 9/11 and happened 7 years before that, and we're not going to let it happen again.
Dr. Kindale, is it perhaps foreign to America in the sense that it didn't quite understand what it was letting itself in for as well when it went into Iraq?
Well, I think American policies, we have to admit, once they went into Iraq, have gone into a lot of blunders, a lot of errors and mistakes, and we as a country, as a nation, we have suffered from these mistakes. But I think we are putting the past behind us now. We are looking forward for a better cooperation with the American troops in order to restore security and hand over the security portfolio to the Iraqi troops after due training and building up these forces, and then there will be no more need for these troops on Iraq. And
but you might have to wait years for that.
Oh, yeah, indeed. And unfortunately, perhaps we might have to wait years for this, but now the occupation has happened, and this is a price that we have to pay. Any sudden and quick withdrawal of these troops from Iraq would leave a security gap, which would be utilized by terrorists, by whoever don't want the political process to go forward.
Yeah. Well, let me throw that point
we might see
to Jeremy Corbyn. If the troops pull out now, it is going to create a bigger problem, whatever the rights and wrongs of having gone there in the first place. If they pull out now, there is a major difficulty.
Well, I'm not sure there is a major difficulty, because at that point all the political forces in Iraq, and that includes those that are represented by people fighting on the ground, are going to have to come to some kind of political understanding and reckoning. Now, the fact that one of the forces has put itself on a 6-month ceasefire surely is an interesting development and worth recognising, that there is a space, possibly a small space, but some kind of space for a political dialogue of what follows when British and American troops have withdrawn from Iraq, because they're going to withdraw. Everybody knows that, and I suspect that whatever Brad says, the US public are going to make sure they're home pretty quickly. It's only a presidential veto that's keeping them there at the present time. Surely we have to look to a political future of Iraq that does not involve foreign forces being inside that country. The disaster of Iraq at the moment, and I go back to the point I started with, 2 million people in exile, more than 500,000 dead, public services much worse than they were in 2003. Nobody can call that any kind of success on any terms.
Brad Blakeman, is it something to be proud of if you're President Bush?
You bet it's something to be proud of. What decisions are made in their time that are appreciated? Not many that I can think of. When we went to the defense of Europe against Nazi Germany, that wasn't exactly a popular thing to do in our country, but it was the right thing to do. Not appreciated at the time. We lost 400,000 Americans, 1 million wounded. You talk about casualties. 60 million people gone from this planet because Europe didn't see the danger of Hitler and weren't strong enough to stop him until he got so strong that they couldn't stop him, and we had to come in and basically save the world. We're in that same predicament. We're not appreciated because these are tough decisions. A war is a tough thing, but let me tell my British friend, if there was a vacuum and we left tomorrow, God help your continent, God help your country, because just listen to what Ahmadinejad says. The president of Iran, he can't wait to get his hands on Iraq, and Syria can't wait to get its hands on Iraq, and they want to build a nuclear weapon, and the sovereign president of Iran tells the world, just like Hitler did, I want to destroy America.
Brad.
I want to destroy Israel. You think we can stand for that?
Dr. Kindale?
No. Yeah, Brad, can you hang on a second?
Jeremy
Brad.
Corbyn, I've got to stop you there because I've got to give the last word to Dr. Kindale, Iraqi himself. If you met President Bush tomorrow, what would you say to him?
I would say and ask him to speed up the process of building up the Iraqi security forces and hand over the security portfolio to these forces and start a gradual and controlled withdrawal of the American forces from Iraq, and let the country be ruled by its own people. We need the world support to not to intervene in Iraqi politics. In this way, then we could run the country in the way we would like it to be.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. My thanks to all my guests, Jeremy Corbyn, Brad Blakeman and Dr. Saad Jawad Kandil. To watch the show online, and if you want to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. aljazeera.net/English. Well, that's the end of this show. Join us again next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.